Good evening, everybody. We'll just get started in just 1 minute as people keep on signing on. We're glad that you are joining us tonight. And we'll just wait a couple more seconds or so. So, Erev Tov, everyone. Thank you for joining us for what we know is a really important issue of our day, part of the Anti-Defamation League and the signature synagogue that we are proud of to be a part of as Temple Emanu-El. I think in November or December, we had a group from Temple Emanu-El go to the ADL'S conference in New York City, Never Is Now. And at that conference, we really developed a strong understanding of the work that the ADL is doing around anti-Semitism and also around other hate speech. And we're really proud to be a signature synagogue here in Westfield and to do this important work. So tonight we are focusing on one specific area of the work that the ADL is doing. There'll be opportunities for questions. You can type them in the chat box and we'll ask them at the end. Unfortunately, I have to sign off early as I'm heading to an adult B'nai Mitzvah class. It's our final class of the year. But this will be recorded and we will share it with our community as well. But we're excited for all of you to be joining us this evening. And I'm going to turn it over to Susan Cohen, our lay leader, who has been partnering with the ADL, who will introduce tonight's speakers, as well as the topic.
Thanks, Ethan. So one of the issues that the Temple Social Action Committee has really been looking at is online hate and how important it is really for us to educate ourselves about it. As Ethan mentioned, we're a signature synagogue with the ADL. Fortunately, as a signature synagogue, we have direct access to ADL's programs, resources, and learning opportunities. So tonight, we are very fortunate to have Dave Sifry. He's VP of the ADL Center for Technology and Society as our speaker. The center, I'm just going to read a little bit about what the center does. The Center for Technology serves as a resource to legislators, journalists, universities, community organizations, and tech platforms, and anyone who's been a target of online hate and harassment. The center develops proactive solutions and advocates for change at all levels of society. And a little bit of background about Dave. He leads a team of innovative technologists, researchers, and policy experts, developing proactive solutions and producing cutting-edge research to protect vulnerable populations. He's got a very storied background. He joined ADL in 2019 after a career as a tech entrepreneur and executive. He founded 6 companies, including Linux Care, if I said that correctly, and Technorati, and served in executive roles in companies including Lyft and Reddit. In addition to his entrepreneurial work, Dave was selected as a technology pioneer at the World Economic Forum and is an advisor and mentor for a select group of companies and startup founders. So we're really lucky to have Dave with us tonight. And as Ethan mentioned, Dave will speak for about 35-40 minutes, and then if you put your questions either in chat or Q&A that's right at the bottom of your screen, then we'll try to get them all answered. So thank you, Dave. Without further ado, if you want to start.
Thank you so much, Susan. By the way, I think you just need to enable screen sharing, please, because I've got a presentation that should be right in your host controls there. But what a warm introduction, and Ethan, so great. No, you need to enable it so that I can do screen sharing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay. I think we can do it now.
I made Hannah the host now, so Hannah can do that as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So I think.
Got it, Hannah?
I think we got
Yep,
it.
I got it. There you go.
Great.
All right. And can everybody see that? I hope everyone can. We'll get this going. Give me 1 second here. Okay. Fantastic. All right. And so as Susan said, yeah, my name is David Sifry, and I'm the VP for the Center of Technology and Society at the Anti-Defamation League. And it's a real privilege to be able to speak to the system group about the Center for Technology and Society, or as we fondly call it, CTS, and our plans for 2020 and beyond. Get a little bit about your valuable feedback and answer some questions that you may have. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Center for Technology and Society. I'm going to start with the assumption that you all know something about the Anti-Defamation League, so I won't go too far into that, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at the end of the presentation. But I want to talk to you a little bit about CTS, describe some of the advocacy work that we do, give you an introduction to some of the new work that we're doing, in particular around the world of online games and around measuring hate online. And hopefully leave you with a better understanding of why this work is important and how you can help. Because bringing ADL's mission into online spaces isn't just an adjunct to what ADL does. More and more, these online spaces are where we're living our lives. I mean, exemplified by our meeting tonight here on Zoom. And while the 21st century has brought about astonishing advances of communication and coordination, empowering all of us to share ideas and connection, there is a dark side. The internet has brought us these incredible gifts. As ideas and connection and friends and family are brought closer, the same tools are being abused to reduce confidence in democratic institutions, polarize factions, harass individuals, and spread deliberate ignorance and hate of Jews, but also of the other. So ADL formed the Center for Technology and Society in response to this. We focus our work on measuring hate online, policy and advocacy, incident response, and funding and conducting research into hate online in all of its forms. What that means is we work closely with tech platforms like Facebook, Google, Twitter, and Reddit. And we also work closely with ADL's Center on Extremism, our government relation and community engagement and civil rights teams, our education group, and our international affairs team. I gotta say, sometimes the work, it feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but we really focus on creating positive change. And we speak truth to power, holding them accountable for their actions or deliberate inactions. Now I'll get to a little bit more about that later. But for example, in our 2019 nationally representative survey, 53% of Americans report being harassed online. Over half. 41% have been called names. And 37% of the US population reported being severely harassed online. Physical threats, sexual harassment, stalking, being doxxed. Ask yourself, how many of you have been harassed online or felt unsafe, severely harassed, or know someone who was? This is serious business, and it hides in plain sight. Literally on the screens that we hold in our hands. And all too often, we don't share these stories, and we end up feeling terribly alone. Or even worse, we just want to hide in shame and pretend that it didn't happen. I mean, after all, it's just words on a screen, right? Well, until it isn't. I'm not sure that I can see a raise of hands, but how many people here know what doxing is? Hannah, maybe can you see the list of or people who've raised their hands?
Yeah, only one person has raised their hand.
One person, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's when someone publishes private or identifying information about you on the internet with malicious intent. Or how about swatting? Just raise your hands in the field. Anyone? Well, swatting is when someone calls the cops, sometimes from another state or even another country, and a SWAT team comes out to your house or workplace, sometimes with disastrous impacts. ADL's Center for Technology and Society released a report just last quarter looking at the issues of hate in a more personal way through these stories of people who have been targets and of victims. Its hate moved to a more personal level, but often the contributing factors were race, gender, sexual identity, or religion. And we compiled some of these stories into a video. Now, as with all the videos that I'm going to show you tonight, there are some disturbing images and some disturbing conversations that may be in these, but we believe that it's actually so important for you to see and to learn about this. But I do want to note, if you want to just be prepared.
You can threaten to murder me.
Threatened to rape my daughter, who's 5.
The police can't help me.
Neither can the courts.
So yeah,
Go ahead.
publish my home address online.
Make a false police report and have a SWAT team deployed to my home.
Because you don't like people like me.
Like me.
Like me. Like me. You cost me my reputation,
My safety,
My job.
my business.
but you have nothing to worry about.
Because laws that should protect me are outdated.
Or don't exist at all.
So no consequences for you.
And no protections for me.
Until we have the laws to fight back.
It doesn't have to be like this.
So last year we created a legislative effort called Backspace Hate. Now, Connecticut and the tri-state area are part of our pilot states. So you may know already something about this, having talked, to some of the folks already here. But for those of you who don't know, I'm going to give you a quick update for those of you who may be hearing about this for the first time. Our 2020 goals are to support support bills in 5 states and get passage in at least 1 state, to formalize our federal advocacy strategy and identify 2 or 3 other states to expand to in 2021. And we actually just had our first major win, passing through both branches of the Washington State Legislature unanimously and getting signed by Governor Inslee on the last day of a shortened legislative calendar. Now, along with the legislative progress, I want to talk a bit about our work with tech companies. Now, for me personally, I come from deep in the tech industry, and I can tell you that there's a problem, and that problem is one that not just people are seeing, but that the tech platforms, big and small, are experiencing. And it shows up in how we experience life on the internet. And it's about, obviously, hate online. But even more importantly, for the big companies who are controlling and are helping to oversee what language gets sent and what posts show up in your feed. It's really about measuring hate online. Let me give you a little bit of a deeper insight here. So YouTube spent months and had dozens and dozens of people working on curbing hate and extremism on their site. They built and tuned artificial intelligence models to repel and deplatform extremists. And last August, announced the results of that work, where they had updated their policies around extremism and white supremacy, and they removed thousands of videos and hundreds of extremist extremist channels. And yet, 3 days after that article was written, the New York Times posted a lengthy piece about the hate that was still on the platform, and in particular, how one person was radicalized, using his video viewing history in graphic detail. Now, by the way, if you're a fan of The Daily, with the New York Times podcast, this was actually expanded into, I believe it's now an 8-part miniseries looking into all of this. And it's fantastic radio. It's called The Rabbit Hole. If you're interested, you can just get it on any podcast player. But what was clear was that even within the largest, best resource companies, and YouTube really does a tremendous amount here, these problems persist. And they're sometimes exacerbated by the business models themselves. So as one of the most senior executives at a social media company told me, hey, you know what? Nobody trusts our numbers. And this is something that we heard as we went behind closed doors to speak with many other industry leaders, that while many, especially the largest platforms, are dedicating people and time to removing and combating hateful content on their sites, it's still just too easy to find hateful content. So despite their best efforts, they've lost credibility in the eyes of the public. Now, I'm a big fan of management guru Peter Drucker, and Drucker famously said, "You can't manage what you don't measure." So this is not only important from the platform perspective, but it's also critically important in order to develop informed policy decisions and to decide where to spend our time and energy in the interventions we choose, and also to measure the impact of the changes made. Now, as I said at the top, hate online is absolutely one of the defining issues of our time. And we've seen the impact of social media on our society, how extremists abuse it, how campaigned harassment has real impacts on users, and how mis and disinformation shapes elections and the world we live in. All of this makes the following facts all the more stark. We really don't know how much hate there is on any platform, or whether anything any platform is doing is working to address it. The only information companies are providing to the public are internal measurements with no external accountability, and this needs to change. Well, ADL has been working over the past several years to find ways to expand its historic work measuring hate into online spaces. In 2018, the Center on Extremism started measuring hate online through their report, Quantifying Hate, a Year of Anti-Semitism on Twitter. The work that CTS is doing now on a new form we call it the Online Hate Index, is literally building on the work of our Center on Extremism colleagues, using the data they identified as part of that study as a basis for building measurements of hateful content. And in 2019, CTS expanded ADL's hate measurement work with 2 surveys. So one, which I gave you a little bit of info about earlier, which is focused on hate and harassment in social media, And the other is focused on hate, harassment, and positive social experiences in online games. So we've undertaken a new initiative, so one that ADL has in its 107-year history never undertaken. And it's to build a suite of software products that we've dubbed the Online Hate Index, or OHI for short, that creates a standardized measurement for hate online. And it's not one that's driven by profits. It's one that's driven by getting it right and making sure that it's transparent and making sure that it incorporates the best and brightest from across the country and across the world. Because hate and extremist ideologies aren't only happening on Facebook, Twitter, and the large social networks. It's showing up everywhere. And one of the most insidious strategies that we found is to go younger, to reach children, and to go where our kids are spending more and more of our time, in games. Now, this may be news to you, but the world of online multiplayer games is huge. It's bigger than the movie and music industries combined. The effects are real. And here's an example of what happened to one of the best gamers in the world. Now, his response in the following video is casual, but it serves as an excellent example of swatting. Now, I apologize in advance. Some of the images and content shown in this video are disturbing, but we think it's vital so people of good conscience can act. So just prepare yourself.
A champion gamer gets the scare of his life. The teen, who recently won $3 million in the Fortnite World Cup, was at home live streaming when armed officers surrounded his house. Turns out he has become the latest victim of swatting after a phony call was placed to 911.
This teen is the world's best gamer after winning the first ever Fortnite World Cup.
Your world champion!
16-year-old Kyle Giersdorf took home the $3 million prize and became an overnight sensation. But now he is the latest victim of swatting. Kyle was live streaming from his home in Pennsylvania when his dad interrupted him.
Dad, I actually can't.
Then he's told what just happened.
I got swatted.
Kyle abruptly leaves the game.
Did he just leave mid-game?
I think so.
Swatting is a dangerous prank during which someone calls 911 to report a fake crime, prompting SWAT teams to respond to the emergency. That's what happened in the Fortnite case. The swatter called 911 to claim Kyle killed his dad.
Carr said he just shot his father with an AK-47. Said he tied up his mother in the garage and he shot him up and down his body.
It was all a monstrous lie. Kyle returned to his game about 10 minutes later.
Yeah, I got swatted. What if I just got bopped? That's scary.
He's right to be scared. In 2017, this 28-year-old father of two was killed after someone called in a false hostage report, directing cops to his home. He was shot dead at his front door.
Fortunately, the Fortnite champ and his family are all okay.
And we conducted a survey of hate and harassment into the online gaming world in July of last year. And what we found really surprised us. Let me give you a little insight. In online multiplayer games like Fortnite that you were looking at earlier, 74% of American gamers reported being harassed, usually over voice chat. Now, it's important to recognize when they're on the game and they're playing, this isn't like text chat. This is like literally you're hearing your voice, you're hearing other people's voices in your headphones. So think about that impact. 67% were called offensive names. 65%, nearly 2/3, reported being severely harassed. 44% physically threatened. 34% reported being stalked online, that their online presence was monitored in-game and the information garnered was used to threaten or harass them. 50% reported having been discriminated against by a stranger on the basis of their identity, usually through the tone of voice or because they heard, particular gender or a particular accent. And most alarmingly, 29% of gamers report having been doxxed in-game. In other words, having a stranger publish private information about them inside of an online game. And people are being exposed to an agenda of hate and extremism. So this is a swastika someone built on one of the most popular games with over 200 million users called Fortnite, where you can actually build structures. And this was one of the structures. And this has been going on for years, but no other civil organization but the Anti-Defamation League is measuring, let alone combating, the new expressions of hate and anti-Semitism. This new propaganda has found its viral delivery system. So you may ask, what can we do? Well, there is hope. I want to show you an experiment conducted by our friends at Sandy Hook Promise and Global Dignity. And I do want to warn you once again that this video contains some discriminatory and hard to watch expressions of language.
It's not like a movie.
Excuse me. Just gotta say one thing. I think gay people are sick, and you guys should just kill yourselves. Just end your miserable existence.
She's so stupid. You're so stupid. You know that though, right? You know you're stupid.
You are the weirdest f***ing kid in school. Why do you always mess with me?
You know what? All of you Muslims, you need to go back to the hellholes you're from.
Can you believe this? F***ing terrorist.
What did you say? You heard what I said. Fat bitches like you should get over themselves. Go on a diet. I'm just waiting for mom. Can you please leave me alone? I'm traumatized to get a gym membership. I hate fat people.
I think you should go. I think you should go.
She upset me too.
I think you should go.
Everyone hates you. You should hate yourself too.
What are you doing? Why are you talking to her like that?
Because she deserves it.
No, she doesn't. Like, walk away right now.
Homosexuality is a disease. You're saving humanity by killing yourself.
Get out of here right now.
Yeah.
Take a walk.
This woman is dangerous. All Muslims are terrorists.
Yeah. I'm also a terrorist, just so you know. That's really mean. Are you okay?
Yeah.
So I want to tell you a little bit about my personal history. I'm a nerd by birth and a geek by training, and was trained as a computer scientist and based in San Francisco. And I've been building companies and tech organizations for 25 years, most recently holding executive positions at Lyft and at Reddit. So I've been on the inside. I know the players and how they think. But I'm also the son of a Holocaust survivor and hidden child. These are the Star of David badges issued to my family after the Nazis invaded Belgium and my mother's family went into hiding. Her family was split up and she survived being hidden by the resistance. She survived. She persevered and flourished. And this is my mother, Anna. Along with being a fantastic mom, Anna also became a teacher. A public school teacher in Oceanside, New York, but also a witness and teacher to hundreds of children and young adults about her experience of the Holocaust. Here she is bearing witness to a class. The picture behind her, by the way, is the fake identity papers that my grandfather had in order to be able to escape from the Nazis. This is why I chose to leave the for-profit tech world and to do this work, because it's up to each of us to be aware and awake, to take action. That genocides don't come out of nowhere. And you can do it back at home in your communities by reaching out and bearing witness, by stepping forward when you see someone bullying or spouting hate or anti-Semitism in the real world or online. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but remember where this leads if we do nothing. And ADL and the Center for Technology and Society stands with you. Our job is to do some of the heavy lifting that individuals can't do alone. And this starts with measurement, because measurement helps us to prioritize where to put the bulk of our efforts. We will release software tools that, starting with anti-Semitism, will allow for a standardized measurement of the amount of hate on each of these platforms. And in conjunction with this work, our Backspace Hate Initiative is getting laws on the books to create criminal and civil penalties for perpetrators of cyberstalking, doxing, swatting, and non-consensual pornography. Common sense laws. And we will continue our work funding and doing applied research to better understand the ecosystem of hate online, its effects on targets and victims, how it propagates and how to attenuate it, and to explore and bring light to wherever hate extremism and anti-Semitism rears its head. Two timely things of note though before I close. So one, when the pandemic hit and everyone switched to doing video conferencing, trolls and extremists took advantage of some of Zoom's popularity and openness and started Zoom bombing. Perhaps some of you have experienced it. And as soon as we started hearing reports, we reached out to the executive team at Zoom, which, because of a member of our technical advisory board who had deeper connections with Zoom, was an investor there, to their credit, they responded. And they made a huge shift in strategy to focus themselves on fixing a number of security issues, including ones that CTS pointed out to them. And we collaborated with their product team and worked with them to help during those times. And we brought their chief product officer, their chief technology officer, and head of their new trust and safety teams in contact with constituents, victims, and law enforcement professionals. One of the things you may notice if you go on Zoom and you see that little security icon that's down there on the bottom, that's part of that work that we worked with them on. And as they've made these changes, we've worked to educate lay leaders, religious leaders, and everyday families getting together to protect themselves from Zoom bombing. So if you lead one of those meetings, you'll notice that icon, and you can go to adl.org to be able to get information on how best to use it and to protect yourself. We continue to work with Zoom and other players in the space to remain vigilant and to help everyday folks to continue to use the internet with less fear of hate and harassment. And we could not do it without your help. Having your friends and families and communities to fight the daily fight against hate. And when we think about policy, it's not just the government's policy that we're focusing on, but also the community standards and policy enforcement mechanisms for private technology companies. So, for example, we work with our colleagues at the Center on Extremism to inform Facebook of the rise of anti-Semitism and anti-Asian content related to COVID-19. In fact, until recently, like a month ago, Facebook wasn't removing conspiracy theory content that alleged Jews and Asians created the virus. But as of about 2 weeks ago, that changed. And you may have noticed in the news today that, Facebook had an issue with some ads. And, those ads had Nazi symbolism on them. And we worked together with them and their teams to identify the symbols, and they saw, that it did in fact violate their policies, and they took those ads down. But you know what? It's still not enough. So along with the NAACP, Color of Change, Free Press, Common Sense Media, and a growing coalition of civil society groups, ADL took the lead and we helped create a new coalition called Stop Hate for Profit. And you can go to the website here. What it's doing is we're calling out Facebook that hate and intolerance on their platform will not be tolerated, and that there's a series of relatively easy, common sense product and policy changes that they could make to help mitigate and ameliorate hate while still protecting the civil rights of every speaker. The call to action here is to go to advertisers. So if you're an advertiser on Facebook, or if you know someone who does, to help them, to let them know about this campaign and to get them to pause their spending on Facebook for the month of July. To show them how serious we are as members of civil society, that we won't tolerate this. They need to fix this. Well, with that, I want to thank you for all of your time, and I'd be really happy to take your questions. Oh, Susan, I think you're on mute.
And all the things I just said were so nice. But what I was saying, Dave, is thank you. It's really very informative. It's also really sad, the conditions that you were showing, but really hopeful, because the ADL will certainly make a big difference. So thank you again for not only your talk with us, but also for all the efforts that the ADL is putting into things. So it's really quite appreciated. And we do have some questions. From Elaine Morgenthal is, why isn't New Jersey a backspace state?
That's a really great question. We only had a limited amount of resources. And I think part of this was legislative calendars. Part of this was finding sponsors for the bills and really just getting things going. And so we have a relatively limited amount of regional support, even though, Hannah and her team in the New York, New Jersey area have been doing terrific. We chose Connecticut just because there was actually some pre-existing support in the legislature for this. What was actually surprising was that New York already had an anti-squatting bill that was on the docket, and so we were actually able to get some movement there before the New York legislature shut down because of the pandemic. And I think next year we'd love to see New Jersey a backspace hate state.
Well, is there anything that we can do to help?
What you can do is contact your legislators and tell them about this and tell them why this is such an important initiative. And I think, maybe even get in touch with Hannah or some of the other folks in our New York, New Jersey office, and they can help direct you to get you the right resources you need to talk to your state legislators to get some sponsors for this legislation. Absolutely.
Great. Another question we have is, from Dave Burke, if we observe hate online, what do you recommend we do?
That's a great question. So the first thing that you can do is you can actually intervene yourself. So just as those people in the video, came and they did the uncomfortable thing and they got in the middle of a conversation and said, this isn't okay, that's the first step that you can do. The second is, if you see content that is really hateful and objectionable, on all of the social media platforms, on every single post, you'll see 3 dots. And sometimes the 3 dots are in the upper right-hand corner and they're horizontal. Sometimes they're vertical, depending on how you're looking at it. But look for those 3 dots in the interface next to that particular post. And you can click on that and you can say, report this. And of course, by the way, please, if there's something that's violent, if there's something that's going on that's unsafe, of course you should call 911. That's by far the most important thing to do. But if you can, you should report it. And then what will happen is you'll get back some kind of a tracking number, depending on the service, right? They'll say, hey, thank you so much for filling out this report. We're going to investigate it. But usually don't stop there. Especially because of the pandemic, the major companies have all reduced the amount of human moderators and human trust and safety teams that are actually looking at some of this content. And in many cases, they're actually using more AI capabilities and automated filtering capabilities to look at reports. So if you see something that looks egregious and you get that report, the next thing to do is go to adl.org, and you'll see on our site, there's a link to report an incident. So you can report that as an online incident and include the reference number and ideally the URL, but even if you just get the reference number, that's usually enough for us to be able to escalate this in case the information or the post is not taken down.
So would you contact the company or the site where it is been posted?
Depending on what the actual resolution was. So many times the resolution will be, it'll actually get taken down. What we tend to do is we then go in there on your behalf, because nobody can get a phone number for any of these people. You can't go to Facebook and find a phone number for someone to contacting if you're being harassed, for example. And that's where ADL can help, because if you send us that information and you give us more details about the incident, somebody from your regional office will contact you, we'll talk through what's going on, and if we can help, we can escalate this to to the people who we have relationships with inside of each of these companies. And in some cases, their policies need to be changed. So they always ask us, can you give us examples of people who are being harmed or marginalized communities that are at risk? And so it's always helpful for us to be able to have these kinds of incident reports, because it allows us to go to them with evidence so that they can actually update and change their policies for everyone, not just for you.
Great. Some other questions? And also a statement, Mark Goldstein says, just only intervene if it's safe and not placing you at risk, which I think is something that you've pretty much said also. And from Eleanor Paris, it's what technology do you use to get the statistics, read the number of people, the percentage of people harassed?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. So we actually work together with a national polling firm called YouGov, where they actually have enormous panels of people, and they make sure that we are getting a nationally representative sample. They work with us to make sure that the questions aren't biased. For example, the online hate and harassment survey, we actually took many of the same questions from a survey that was done by the Pew Center on the internet, which is considered by many to be the gold standard in terms of doing surveys. And we actually were doing it because they decided not to do a follow-up study from their 2018 report. So we were able to use the exact same methodology and the exact same reports, and make sure that we had a large enough sample. And we also tend to oversample, in addition to that, to people who are part of marginalized communities as well. So, and then it's all weighted statistically and so on and so forth. So it's not like we're checking every single person who's ever played a game or every single adult in the United States. We use a polling mechanism that of course has certain margins of error, but if you want more details on all of that, it's all laid out in our reports on adl.org.
Great. And then do you want to talk at all about what ADL is doing at all with Black Lives Matter, or anything that relates to the current situation with all of the protests, etc.?
We're working very closely. First of all, Black Lives Matter. And just want to state that unequivocally, even though ADL is, in its background, it comes from a Jewish background, we stand with anyone and all who are marginalized or who are victims of maltreatment and hate. And so, for us, there's a deep sorrow about the murders that we have seen, and a deep collaboration. So, for example, working with the NAACP, and Color of Change, who are two leading organizations around racial justice, around going to Facebook and doing Stop Hate for Profit. And I mean, there's many more things that we're doing that don't necessarily relate to the Center for Technology and Society itself. But I would strongly advise you to please, go to ADL.org and check out our blog, check out our Twitter stream, and you'll get a ton of information about the work that we're doing in support of our Black brothers and sisters, and really trying to work on these systemic issues of injustice.
Thank you. We had one question, but I think it was something similar. Yeah, if someone sees online hate, is there an email or online place to report it, which you've really covered. So if anybody has any questions, if not, we will thank Dave very much for presenting all this information to us and for all the work that the ADL does. So last chance for questions. Hannah, you're on mute. Okay, well, thank you. And everyone, I'm sure, says thank you. I know we have some personal thank yous right here. So thank you, Dave. It's been very appreciated and very informative.
Susan, and thank you, thank you and Temple Emanu-El for being part of our Signature Synagogues program, for being so active. I want to thank everybody who is here and who is participating and listening. Each and every one of you can take action. And this is not an insolvable problem. We can and have made change here. And go to stophateforprofit.org, come to ADL.org, and we'd love to have you be a part of the ongoing solution. You're already doing so much just by being here. And thank you so much for your continued support.
Great, thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you all.